top scientific institute on life issues released a thorough assessment of the work of over 2,500 U.S. pregnancy support centers. The Charlotte Lozier Institute report documents nearly 1 million new clients, over 16 million support contacts, and vital services without cost. That may tell why polling shows 91% of U.S. respondents support pregnancy support centers. This is Life News Radio. Persecution around the world has manifested itself through the centuries, but it is worse today than ever before. Aid to the church in need and its donors have been there to help since 1947, never abandoning the church or her most vulnerable children. Will you stand up for your faith and accompany our brothers and sisters on their spiritual journey? Visit churchinneed.org. churchinneed.org. The New York Times is trying to stir up controversy over the U.S. Supreme Court, especially in its Dobbs decision that overturned Roe. They discovered in emails between Justice Neil Gorsuch and the author of the Dobbs decision, Justice Samuel Alito, that Gorsuch received the 98-page draft and replied with his approval within minutes. By suggesting that this means Gorsuch gave little thought to the draft, the Times simply ignores that some people, especially those holding views in common, often communicate substantially outside of emails. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at livenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network presents Saints and Seasons. Today we celebrate Ember Wednesday of Advent. 4 times a year, once in each season, the Church traditionally sets aside a Wednesday, a Friday, and a Saturday as days of penance to consecrate each season to God. These days are called the Ember Days, from the Latin quatuor tempora, meaning 4 times. Ember Week of Advent, which also always follows St. Lucy's Day, begins on the Wednesday after Gaudete Sunday, the 3rd Sunday of Advent, and begs for God's blessing upon the season of winter. This winter embertide punctuates the preparatory season of Advent, emphasizing penance during the final anticipatory days before the great feast of our Lord's Nativity and the joyous season of Christmastide that follows. Ember Wednesday, like Ember Saturday, would traditionally be a day of fasting and partial abstinence from meat. St. Leo the Great, like others, emphasizes also the importance of almsgiving, saying, "Let the abstinence of him that fasts become the meal of the poor man." Though only the current code of the Church is binding today, it is certainly of great spiritual benefit to voluntarily unite oneself with the ancient practices of the Church in at least some small way, imitating the many known and unknown saints of times past. In this way, one takes greater part in the living, breathing, and praying of the timeless body of Christ throughout the centuries. For more about the saints and seasons of the Catholic Church, visit thestationofthecross.com/saints and seasons.
The Catholic Current, bringing Christ to the world and the world to Christ.
I have no clue what my future looks like. I know who my future is, and it lies in the hands of Christ. I'm not worried about where I'm going to live, what I'm going to do. My life, I want it to be His, and there's such a freedom in that. I never, ever thought that I would find freedom in a laid-down, surrendered life to Christ.
The Catholic Current, 5 p.m. Eastern, from the Station of the Cross and on the iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Hi, Joe McLean here, host of A Catholic Take, heard on the Station of the Cross each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern. A bold synthesis of information and inspiration, keeping you up to date on the news and issues that you may have missed from a courageous Catholic perspective. That's A Catholic Take, weekday morning, 7 a.m. right here on the Station of the Cross and the free iCatholic Radio mobile app. Download it today. God love you.
This is Joe McLean, and you're listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of the truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McLean starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. It's great to be on with you. Scrooge, your favorite adaptations in film. I mean, it's gone back now more than 100 years old on film. Can you believe that? 1901, I think, was the first one. I wonder what your favorite is. Joseph Pearce is going to be on later in the hour to talk about his favorite adaptations of the Myers Lament, coming up at 30 past the hour. I have my favorite, and it's not even on the list that anybody includes, and I don't know why, because they're all wrong and I'm right. We'll talk about that and get your take as well in this hour. But I also want to cover more on the Fiducia Supplicans document that has dropped and has caused incredible controversy. I mean, just in an age of division, I guess more division is on the menu. I mean, I'm not sure. It seems like a little tone deaf, but nonetheless, Return to Traditions. Anthony Stine is on the team today. We're going to be talking about the bishops who are now saying you can't refuse but bless same-sex marriage, and the bishops who are saying you can never do this ever under any circumstances. So the division is getting more clear and more stark. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition is going to be on to talk about that at 14 past the hour. All that and more coming up this hour. So we have a lot to cover. But don't forget, the film is out, Secret of the Saints in the End Times, over on ICR Plus. You can get to it online, thestationofthecross.com/ICR Plus. But you can also find it on the mobile app. If you just download the ICR mobile app, iCatholic Radio, search for iCatholic Radio in your mobile app store, iOS and Android, and check out that ICR Plus icon, the bottom right corner there. You're in business, super fast, super easy. A great way to be on the team all the time. Download iCatholic Radio today. Let's pray. Let's get started. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come. Before thee I stand sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And now your saint of the day.
Saint Dominic of Silos, pray for us. Dominic was born a Spanish peasant in the year of our Lord 1000. He was a shepherd in the fields before he grew into his vocation as a shepherd of souls, becoming first a Benedictine monk and then a priest. After he was made prior of the monastery, Dominic defied the King of Navarre when that monarch attempted to seize the monastery's lands and the treasures of their church, and he and a few other monks were banished. They took refuge in Castile under King Ferdinand I, and were granted an abandoned monastery that Dominic, as the new abbot, restored to great beauty and piety that has persevered to this day. He was renowned for working great miracles during his lifetime, and particularly cared for Christian captives of the Moors, obtaining the liberation of many through his prayers and masses, as well as direct financial assistance, aided by the donations of wealthy benefactors. Dominic's day of death in 1073 was revealed to him beforehand, and within a few years his relics were venerated in the monastery church where they still reside. He quickly became a beloved saint throughout Spain, with a special patronage for pregnant women, prisoners, and against rabies. His crozier, or staff, was kept by the beds of Spanish queens in labor in order to bless them. And in the late 12th century, Blessed Juana de Aza prayed at Dominic's shrine for the conception of a son. Her prayer was answered, and in gratitude she named her son Dominic. This later Dominic, an even more famous saint, would go on to found the Order of Preachers, or the Dominicans. Saint Dominic of Silos, pray for us.
And now your headline news. LifeSite News reports head of Austrian Bishops' Conference says priests cannot say no to blessing homosexual couples anymore. The head of the Austrian Bishops' Conference, Archbishop Franz Lochner, has said that priests, quote, can no longer say no to a request for a blessing of homosexual couples after the publication of the Vatican's controversial declaration, Fiducia Supplicans. He says, quote, I believe that the Church recognizes that a relationship between two people of the same sex is not entirely without truth. There is love, there is fidelity, there is also hardship shared and lived in faithfulness. This should also be acknowledged, close quote. he said in the interview. When asked by the interviewer if priests will be obliged to bless same-sex couples, Archbishop Franz Lackner said that in the sacramental and religious life, it is always difficult to speak of a must. However, he added, basically you can no longer say no. More on that coming up. Breitbart reports Border Patrol seizes $10 million worth of meth and cocaine in San Diego. A commercial tractor-trailer driver caught transporting narcotics into the U.S. from the southern border, according to Customs and Border Protection. The 28-year-old driver was intercepted Wednesday morning at Otay Mesa Cargo Facility in San Diego, California, where CBP officers pulled hundreds of suspicious packages, easy for me to say, from vats of jalapeno paste from the truck. In total, 332 packages of methamphetamine and cocaine weighing 3,600 plus pounds were seized from the shipment. CBP estimates the street value at nearly $10.4 million. Yikes. Those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from Luke chapter 1, verses 26 through 38. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a town of Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man named Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And coming to her, he said, "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you." But she was greatly troubled at what was said, and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. Then the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. Behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called Son of the Most High, and the Lord God will give him the throne of David his father, and he will rule over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end." But Mary said to the angel, "How can this be, since I have no relations with a man?" And the angel said to her in reply, "The Holy Ghost will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God. And behold, Elizabeth, your relative, has also conceived a son in her old age, and this is the 6th month for her who was called barren. For nothing will be impossible for God." Mary said, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word." Then the angel departed from her. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Pseudo Jerome said, "And it was well said, full of grace, for to others grace comes in part. Into Mary at once the fullness of grace wholly infused itself. She truly is full of grace, through whom has been poured forth upon every creature the abundant rain of the Holy Ghost. But already he was with the virgin who sent the angel to the virgin. The Lord preceded his messenger, for he could not be confined by place who dwells in all places, whence it follows the Lord is with thee." Do you catch what Pseudo Jerome is trying to say here? They're not sure if Jerome wrote this or not, but it comes from his era, so it's labeled as Pseudo Jerome. The Greek expositor says, "But as she might be accustomed to these visions," catch that? As she might be accustomed to these visions, the evangelist ascribes her agitation not to the vision, but to the things told her, saying she was troubled at his words. Now observe both the modesty and wisdom of the virgin, the soul, and at the same time the voice. When she heard the joyful words, she pondered them in her mind, and neither openly resisted through unbelief, nor forthwith lightly complied, avoiding equally the inconstancy of Eve and the insensibility of Zacharias. I cannot express or just make this point enough. You've got to understand. Mary is not like you and me. She's not like the prophet Daniel. She's not like Zacharias. She's not like the shepherds. She's not like the apostle John. She's not like those in the book of Judges who, when they see an angel, they are frightened near death. They fall over almost to die of fear because of what they see. No. She is not like you and me. We would die at such a sight or be very afraid. Not her. She's not afraid of what she sees. It was what the angel says that gives her pause. Please remember this. This is crucially important. The next time you have a conversation at the dinner table at Christmas time with some anti-Catholic, non-Catholic friend, family member, ignorant Catholic who doesn't know better, please make this point because it's crucially important to understand the role of Our Lady. St. Ambrose would say, she wondered also at the new form of blessing, unheard of before, reserved for Mary alone. St. Ambrose, the guy who converted Augustine, that guy, he said that. Origen said, for if Mary had known that similar words had been addressed to others, such a salutation would never have appeared to her so strange and alarming. If only I had more time to share with you. Kekade tomene, the very greeting the angel uses, sent by God to say these words. He didn't choose them for himself. The angel only communicates what God wants. She is Kekade tomene. She always was, she always is now, and will always be full to the maximum potential of God's actual sanctifying grace. No other human being on planet Earth has been accused of being that. This is used as a title. She is the full of grace. Let that sink in. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Here at the Station of the Cross, we proudly bring the truths of the Catholic faith to countless listeners through radio and mobile devices, and we're grateful for the feedback we've received.
It just really connected me to my faith. I always considered myself 100% Catholic, but didn't really realize that I wasn't fully practicing my faith, so I learned so much through the Station on the Cross and began just getting deeper in my prayers and feeling just so much closer to God and so well versed in learning more about the Bible and more about what actually it means to be Catholic. So it became very, very important to me, and I listen to the radio station daily, and I absolutely love it. I make it a regular practice of donating every time they have their fundraising, and just love it and wouldn't want it to ever go away.
If you've been blessed by listening to the Station of the Cross, let us know. Call 1-877-888-6279, extension 112. Then share your testimonial with us.
Please join us in a prayer to our guardian angel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O holy guardian angel, take care of our soul and body. Enlighten our mind that we may know the Lord better and love him with all our heart. Help us in our prayers so that we may not give in to distractions. Assist us with your advice so that we may see the good and carry it out with generosity. Defend us from the insidious snares of the enemy and sustain us in temptations that we may always be victorious. Remedy our coldness in our worship of the Lord. Cease not to protect us until you have brought us into paradise, where we will praise our good God together for all eternity. Amen.
Be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's great to be on with you. Hey, who's your favorite Scrooge? Out of all of the almost, I guess it's been 120 years, 22, 23 years of movie adaptations of A Christmas Carol. Who is your favorite Scrooge in all that time? Joseph Pearce joins us at 30 past to share his. I've got mine. And mine is not even on the list of all the lists I found and I searched yesterday. Absolutely appalling. All those lists are wrong. I'm absolutely right. I wonder what your opinion is. You can share that in the show today. But joining us right now is Dr. Anthony Stine from Return to Tradition. The Fiducia Supplicans division, the black hole, the great divide continues to widen today. And we covered it a lot yesterday, but I'm glad to get Dr. Stine back on the program to talk about it. Welcome back. Good morning to you. Thanks for being on with us today. Golly gee whiz. I mean, the hits just keep on coming, Dr. Stine. I mean, the bishops are coming out now, and some are saying you have no choice but to bless, and some are saying there's no way in the world we do this. Where are we stand on this story?
This is a very interesting story, the way it's developing. I'm reminded that Pope Francis said early on that he might be the Pope to cause a schism. And I was hoping that he was just, kind of joking. But we have the bishops from Kazakhstan, Archbishop Peta, I think. My pronunciation is probably wrong. It usually is. Along with his auxiliary bishop, the more famous Athanasius Schneider, issued a statement saying that under no circumstances will the priests of Kazakhstan do this. Now, where does a priest's first duty to obedience lie? With their ordinary or with the Holy Father? Because a decree from Rome says that the bishops have no say in this. Both this decree and Francis's statement back in October said that the bishops have no say in this, that it's up to the individual priest. Now, on the flip side of that, the Austrian bishops have come out and said that priests cannot deny anybody who wants these blessings. So again, where does a priest's first duty to obedience lie? With their ordinary or with the Holy Father? That is a question every priest in this situation will have to answer themselves, because ultimately this is causing enormous scandal among the clergy, among the laity. You're seeing people who had previously been on the same side of a lot of things suddenly not being on the same sides of things anymore, which is odd. I was not expecting to see some waffling on this document from some popular voices where they were saying, well, this is a moderate document. It's not really moderate. If you read it, there are distinctions being made in the document that have no meaning. That we saw within 12 hours of the issuing of this, James Martin going on Instagram, posting pictures of a quote-unquote gay married Catholic couple that he was blessing in a parish, from the looks of it. I don't know if you talked about that or not yet, but he's got the pictures of it. So.
Yeah, I pointed this out yesterday, how what I think is funny about this story is how many people are saying, no, that's not what Pope Francis did not say that you could bless same-sex couples. And then I quote the actual document that actually says this is about the blessing of same-sex couples or any couple in an irregular marriage. It says it in the document itself. So anybody who says, hey, this is not about that is clearly wrong. They're just not reading the document. It does, in fact, say that their goal, the context here was, how can we bless same-sex marriage, same-sex unions, as they're calling them, or irregular unions without violating church teaching. Clearly, Father James Martin, the National Catholic Reporter, the America Magazine, let alone New York Times, CNN, Reuters, and a bunch of other outlets have all said this is about blessing same-sex couples. They all believe this has opened wide the door to that, and yet so many, either out of naivete or just they just don't want to deal with this, and they just don't want to come to grips with the reality of what this pontificate is in fact doing, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. This is clearly about this. And I'm reminded of a report we got 2 years ago, I think now, out of Rome, that said, according to one observer who was himself not the best witness because he was himself an active homosexual and an advocate for that stuff, he estimated that from his sources that something like 75% of the curia were involved in that lifestyle.
Wow.
And that you would find any place you go in the Western world, like a third or a half of the priests and a third or half of the bishops. Because the United States is so conservative, we can dial those numbers back a little bit, but not by that much. And it would go a long way to explaining this document and a lot of the details about this document. The other thing that nobody's really mentioning, though, is the irregular situations. If I were a Mormon on the fringes of Mormon society with multiple wives in quotes here, right, I could almost look at that document and start considering becoming a Catholic. Now, obviously, that's not going to happen. But you see that you're seeing you can easily make the leap to polyamory.
Where does it stop?
Yeah,
I mentioned this yesterday. You got one man, 3 wives, 1 wife, 3 husbands, a wife and her favorite monkey at the zoo. There was an actual story about that. A woman got kicked out of a zoo because she was having an affair with a monkey. Like, she could show up and ask for she could. I think that's where I got it from. I got it from you. I think she could ask for a blessing. I mean, this is the possibilities are now endless. Pandora's box.
is open. I will say this, though. Andreas Weilzer from LifeSite News has reported this morning that the archbishop there in Austria has tried to walk back through a spokesperson saying no personal obligation can be derived from a general openness to blessing same-sex couples. This is after he was asked directly, hey, can a priest say no? And he said, no, they can't say no. He said that yesterday. He's trying to walk that back today. But the African bishops aren't putting up with it, are they? You reported on this on your channel this morning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not putting up with this. In fact, they told the Vatican 9 months ago that they were not going to go along with this. This was, if you start doing searches for this, you'll find unequivocal declarations back in March about this very issue. They saw this coming. And the laity scandalized. Now, I'm not surprised if you've been paying any attention whatsoever to what's going on in the church in Africa. A lot of those countries are passing laws that would make the most strident American conservative, mainstream American Protestant conservative, blush about the treatment of homosexuality in the culture. And but it's because it's much more closer to, Christendom than, frankly, where we are now, which is a statement some people might bristle at. But take a look at the culture in America. Take a look where we are now. When you speak out against this, you're going to be given a lot of problems. And I've seen a lot of observers point this out. Get ready for the Catholic Church's just bake the cake moment, because that's going to happen. You're going to have bishops and priests confronted by activists who want their, quote, union blessed by the church. And they will have Francis's document in hand.
Yep.
And
so will the judge.
Priests say no. Yeah, so will the judge. And when the good priests say no, what happens next?
It's going to be an ugly court battle. And we remember this from the pandemic. You remember this? How many Catholics said, I have a religious conscience. I cannot take that shot because my religious beliefs hold that. And what was the response? I mean, there's a famous Twitter priest who is just lambasting all of these Catholics for trying to deny or not want to take the jab because what the Pope said, you should take it. And that got quoted so many times. It got quoted in court cases. It got quoted with employers to their employees over and over again. We're going to see that, but times 1,000 on this case. This is such a hot button issue. I feel so bad for so many Catholics that are going to be stuck in the middle of this situation. And especially how many, and I said this yesterday, how many priests are going to be confronted by these activists. They're going to look for these opportunities. They're going to walk in. They're going to be wearing tuxedos, flowers, photographer. And they're like, we're just here for a blessing. That's all. We just want a blessing. No big deal. I mean, and what are they going to do? They're going to be so afraid of their own shadow in that moment. They're probably just going to bless them. I think 9 out of 10. And for those that don't, it's court time. And then they get probably removed for being insensitive. Their bishop's probably going to remove them. It's just going to be an ugly situation ahead. And all of this could have been avoided by clarity, but instead we have more ambiguity.
So pray for your priests and, offer them whatever support you can, those good ones who they will need your support for them to stand firm. Because remember, your priests are human and it'll be their moment of testing. And not everybody passes those tests, but it's much easier for them if you support them. And if you let them know that if this happens, you will have their back. So make sure to support your good priests, folks.
Do you think this will be like Traditionis Custodes, where a lot of bishops will just quietly try to kind of do their thing without ruffling any feathers, and then it's sort of being forced upon them? I mean, that was one of the issues in Bishop Strickland's case. In this case, too, do you think it'll be like that, where a lot of bishops will just quietly try to ignore this and just continue on doing what they've always done? But do you think the Vatican will hammer them on that?
I want to say yes, except there's the one thing in the document that I haven't seen anybody else comment on is that the document itself says that the Vatican will not issue any clarifications on the document, which is a weird, probably uncanonical thing to do. Remember, dubia are a pretty normal course of events. We don't normally hear about them. Cardinal Fernandez has answered like 6 of them or something since he became the prefect of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, and he's made them the responses public, partially because they're always on hot button things. So dubia are part of the normal course of events, but this document says no further clarifications are coming. Now think about that for a moment. You're going to have a lot of these priests. You're going to have a lot of people just left high and dry to figure this out all on their own. So what is that going to mean when you get a bishop who says, I'm just going to ignore this for as long as I possibly can? Well, the document says priests can make up their decisions themselves. So you go to the typical ultra-modernist parish in your diocese, which for some reason often are often called St. Pius X parish, by the way, if you ever noticed that. It's one of those weird sort of things, facts of history. Everyone I've ever seen of those has been like a parish in the round with an American grandstand style bandstand, but just crazy. But you'll probably get those priests will be happy to do the blessings. But what about the normal parish? It's like a normal parish 3 minutes from my house, where they're middle of the road on most things. You're not going to hear a political homily from the AMBO. What are they going to do? That's the question, because if it's ultimately left up to the priest, and if you have a bishop who often just keeps his head down about this stuff, then he's probably not going to issue any public directives to the priests. And he might even be afraid to issue a more subtle directive, like a not for public eyes one, because it'll probably get leaked. Again, you've got priests in every diocese in large numbers who are sympathetic to this document. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on them for internally to go along.
I mean, just think about what this will do to seminarians. I mean, you're a young man, you feel called, but then it hits you like a 2x4 across the forehead. I may find myself in one of these troubling situations in the future. Mm-hmm. I mean, how many men will abandon their vocation because they don't want to deal with this nonsense moving forward? They just want to proclaim the good, the true, and the beautiful, provide the sacraments. They don't want to have to navigate these insane legal battles that are ahead for these men. I mean, this is so tone deaf. This is so terrible. I can't even imagine. Hey, Dr. Stine, that music means we're out of time. I appreciate you jumping on with us today. Check out his channel if you haven't already done so, and I can't believe you haven't. But to return to tradition, we'll link to it in the show notes. Dr. Stine, if you want to come back at the top of the hour and join us for the after show, you're more than welcome. But God bless you. God love you. Praise be to God. Hey, who's your favorite Scrooge? I would love to know. Joseph Pearce joins us after the break to share his. I mean, I have mine. Boy, I can't believe nobody else agrees with me. They're all wrong. We'll be right back.
The Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network is dedicated to answering the critical need of access to quality, consistent, professional, and proven Catholic programming. We cannot rely on other media outlets to properly represent our church. Catholic radio reaches Catholics, non-Catholic Christians, and non-believers alike. As a nonprofit lay organization financially independent of your diocese, our apostolate is listener-supported.
Many atheists assert the only real form of knowledge is scientific knowledge, thus excluding any sort of religious knowledge, whether philosophical or theological. Such a belief is called scientism, and it's unreasonable for two reasons. First, it's self-refuting. Its truth cannot be verified by the scientific method. It's a metaphysical proposition, and as such, is not scientific knowledge. But if science can't verify the truth of scientism, well then, scientism itself cannot be a legitimate form of knowledge, in which case, it's self-refuting. Moreover, scientism undermines science as a rational form of inquiry, because it denies presupposed philosophical assumptions that are necessary to even do science, such as there's an external world outside the minds of scientists. So, to reject God's existence on the grounds that it's not scientific knowledge is simply unreasonable. I'm Carlo Broussard with a ready reason for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Father Willie Doyle, an Irish Jesuit priest, known for his joy even in the face of war. His courage made him legendary. His compassion made him beloved. Father Willie gave his life on the battlefield of World War I, insisting that he be with his men. Now his cause for canonization has been opened. To find out more about this man of heroic virtue, visit the Willie Doyle Association at www.williedoyle.org.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean, and here are your headline news. The Pillar reports Cardinal Becciu retains luxury Vatican apartment after conviction. Cardinal Angelo Becciu retains the use of a palatial Grace Favor apartment in Vatican City despite being convicted of numerous financial crimes. Becciu has been a resident for years in the apartment at top floor, the Palazzo del Santo Uffuzio, the extraterritorial building that's adjacent to St. Peter's Square, which also houses the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. It also used to house Cardinal Burke until he got notice that he's paying up top dollar or get out. Anyway, sources close to the Vatican City State's Governorate has told that Pillar that despite changes in Vatican policy issued by Pope Francis earlier this year, Cardinal Becciu is not paying the top market rates for the property, but instead a nominal monthly rent in line with the privileges customarily extended to senior curial officials. So even though he's guilty of crimes, he still gets to enjoy that privilege. CNA reports Irish diocese to rely on laity to preside over funerals amid shortages of priests. More than 40 laymen and women in the Diocese of Clogher in the north of Ireland will soon begin presiding over funeral liturgies amid a shortage of priests. A major vocation crisis could result in fewer than 10 active priests in the diocese in less than 20 years, according to the local ordinary Bishop Larry Duffy. Bishop Duffy announced in a Christmas pastoral letter December the 16th that the lay ministers would lead the liturgy of reception of the body at the church and the rite of committal at the graveside. Yikes. And Catholic Vote reports Colorado Supreme Court Trump ineligible for presidency. In a shocking 4-3 decision, the Colorado Supreme Court narrowly ruled that former President Donald Trump is disqualified from appearing on the state's 2024 Republican primary ballot, saying, quote, President Trump incited and encouraged the use of violence and lawless action to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, close quote, on January 6, 2021, the ruling stated. And those are your headline news. I think Vivek Ramaswamy said he will also walk away from Colorado if they don't add him back. Found that interesting. Anyway, good morning to everybody hanging out with us on iCatholic Radio. Love having you guys on the team. Download ICR today, iCatholic Radio, in your iOS or Android app store, and then get the film for free. You can actually watch the film, The Saints, Secret of the Saints in the End Times. We just released it on ICR Plus, and it's on iCatholic Radio. Just download iCatholic Radio today. Let us know that you have. That'd be wonderful. But I would love to know who your favorite Scrooge is. It's been about 123 years, maybe 22. I can't do math off the fly, but 122 years of film adaptations of A Christmas Carol and Scrooge himself. And I'm curious who your favorite is. Let us know in the comments of the live video feeds. You can find them at thestationofthecross.com/ACT, where all the live video feeds are. I would love to know, get your take on it. I certainly have mine, and so does Joseph Pearce. And he joins us now this morning because he's got an article over at the Imaginative Conservative. We're going to link to his website, jpearce.co, and you can find it in the blog section there, or you can go to the Imaginative Conservative. We're going to link to both. But good morning to you, Joseph Pearce. Grateful for your time today. Scrooge, I think the most underrated, highly misunderstood literary character in the history of literary characters, in my opinion. What do you say, Joseph Pearce?
He's certainly one of the most powerful. I mean, for me, the most powerful character in the whole of literature is probably the prodigal son. In other words, that Jesus Christ himself is the teller of the greatest stories with the greatest moral message. But in some sense, Scrooge is a type of the prodigal son. And I think that's why we are so overjoyed when he comes to his senses and comes to his knees, if you like, because as that great Irish philosopher Bono from U2 said, if you want to kiss the sky, you have to learn how to kneel. And that's what happens with Scrooge at the end. He learns how to kneel, and that's only then can he kiss the sky. That's why it's such a joyful story. That's why we continue to read Charles Dickens' original work, and that's why we continue to enjoy the various film adaptations that you mentioned.
I love this story. My family watches it. We listen to the audiobook versions. We usually watch a version or two of this story every Christmas. It doesn't get old, does it? It's a timeless story, don't you think?
Yeah, exactly. I refer back again to the parable of the prodigal son. But that story's been told for 2,000 years. We never tire of hearing it because every time we hear it, it's applicable. In other words, it applies to us. It applies to other people we know. It applies to us in various ways. And we are the prodigal son. We are the forgiving father, please God. We are the envious brother. So we see aspects of ourselves. Same thing with Scrooge. We all know that we have been hard-hearted. Our particular sin might not be avarice, which obviously is Scrooge's main sin, greed, but that's fed by pride, which is the father of all the sins. And all of us are prideful at times. In other words, we do what we want and not what we should. That's an act of pride. And so I think that we see in Scrooge, in some sense, an aspect of who we are at our worst. And we also see in his conversion who we are or who we can be at our best by the grace of God. And I think that's the power of the story, and especially when it's brought to life by great film directors and great actors.
Let's talk about, before we name names, okay, I do want to get your take on the various adaptations, and there's been a bunch of them for sure. I mean, I have a list here of 24, and that's not even inclusive of everything, right? So, but in general, playing Scrooge, there's been such a wide variety of actors who have portrayed Scrooge, and dare I say, actresses too. There's at least one female on the list I have in front of me. How do you think that they should play them? Like, don't name names, but just in general, should Scrooge be depicted as just the most miserable of creatures, or from your view of the various versions of the film over the years, which ones portrayed him in a dark way, lighter fare, and which do you think is correct and which do you think is incorrect?
Well, the most important is that the story as a whole, obviously it's not called Scrooge, it's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Some film adaptations are called A Christmas Carol, some are called Scrooge. Scrooge is quite clearly and obviously the main focus and character. But the most important thing is that the film adaptation has to reflect the spirit of Christmas. And it has to reflect the spirit of Christmas as presented by Charles Dickens in the story, which is, in other words, a specifically Christian understanding of Christmas, and a specifically Christian understanding of the need to love the Lord our God and to love our neighbor, the two great commandments. And if that's not done, it's a dereliction and a desecration of the story. So, I don't trust most modern, very modern adaptations, because they're all trying to twist it and spin it in anti-Christian or unchristian or non-Christian ways. And that is that's basically a desecration of Charles Dickens's work. It's a desecration of the story itself, and it's a desecration of Scrooge, because the whole point is that Scrooge comes to his Christian senses.
Now, a lot of people say that the Victorian era that Charles Dickens is writing about was really devoid of that Christmas spirit in many ways, which was the reason why he felt called to write, or part of the reason why he felt called to write this. So the giving of gifts, the decorations, the celebrations, the dinners, that was all fairly recent and new because of and that really is rooted in their anti-Catholic crusade under Queen Elizabeth. Is that fair to say?
Well, yes and no. I think it's an exaggeration. There was a film that came out relatively recently called The Man Who Invented Christmas, where they basically said if it wasn't for Charles Dickens, Christmas wouldn't exist. Well, that's obviously nonsense. Charles Dickens is, when he's talking about the ghost of Christmas present, he's seeing what Christmas is happening like on that particular day, and the Christmases of Scrooge's own past, in other words, the relatively recent history. It's quite clear there's a living tradition of celebration on the Feast of Christ Mass, Christmas. Now, the point is, of course, you're correct, that there had been an effort for 300 years by Dickens's time to crush Catholicism in England. By the time Dickens writes that story, Catholicism is on the rise. There's a great Catholic revival caused by John Henry Newman's conversion and the conversion of numerous others, and by the Irish diaspora following the potato famine. There's lots of Irish people moving to England, Irish Catholics. So there's a revival going on anyway. But I do think that Dickens has contributed to the festive spirit of Christmas. And I do think that the character of Scrooge has also contributed, because none of us want to be seen to be like Scrooge at Christmas time. We want to be seen to be full of the spirit of the season, which is the spirit evoked by the spirits, but also the spirit evoked by Scrooge's nephew, and by the other joyful characters we see in the story, the Cratchit family, in contradistinction to the lonely, miserly figure of the man who refuses the spirit of the season. So none of us want to be Scrooge. So in that sense, yes, Dickens has contributed to a revivification, a revigoration of the spirit of Christmas, and thanks be to God for him for that.
Yeah. Now, Charles Dickens was coming off of a flop when he wrote this book, and then I think he tried to follow this book up, if I'm not mistaken, with another ghost story that didn't really come off either. So what explains the success of A Christmas Carol from his career perspective?
Well, he obviously had many big hits. He was one of the biggest hitters in English literature in the 19th century. Some books would have been more successful than others. None of his other Christmas stories were as impactful or as good, and I think that's probably partly because if your motive is to have another hit, in other words, if your motive is to be successful, be famous, or to make money, then that's not the right motive to actually have the muse, the gift of inspiration, the grace, cooperating with you. Quite clearly with A Christmas Carol, he was inspired by the muse of the spirit of Christmas himself in order to write a good story. If he's trying to replicate that in some sort of mercenary manner, we shouldn't be surprised if it's not going to work in the same way.
Yeah. All right, let's start with the ones you don't like. Specific. It's time to name names, Joseph Pearce. What adaptations are on the bottom of your list that you don't like, you didn't appreciate, you hated them for some odd reason? Which ones would you say are in the bottom of the list?
Well, that I'm very, very sensitive. People that know me might find that surprising, but I am. So I find it very difficult to actually watch adaptations of great works of literature, Shakespeare especially, if I know it's going to actually be a dereliction of the spirit of the work. So I avoid most adaptations of Christmas Carol that I don't already know through recommendation from people I trust are good and worth watching, because I don't want to be offended or worse, slimed. Sometimes you watch something and you feel as if you've been covered in slime. Well, I don't need that experience, quite frankly. So I don't really know the really bad ones because I've made a point of avoiding them. So the ones that we watch are the ones that we know are good, and they're the ones we return to every year. I have particular favorites. There are none of the ones we watch that I dislike. There's one that really is old, and I think it's not necessarily the fault of the film. The recording is not in great quality, and it's just it sounds not great, and the film itself. So
all right,
that's just unfortunate.
Before I run into the break, though, which ones have you avoided? So maybe you don't know that they're really, really bad because you've not watched them, but which ones have you intentionally avoided watching?
I can't remember. I have disconnected myself from the culture of death as far as possible. And when I hear of adaptations that are of that spirit, I walk away, and I don't know celebrity names because I'm blissfully ignorant of the famous.
Wow. All right. So, okay. There's a bunch on the list, and I would say there's several that aren't any. I didn't like Bill Murray's Scrooge in 1988. I didn't care for that. I think the blasphemy alone kind of turned me off big time on that one. But there are several here that I think people would say that they absolutely love. But then there's like some animated ones that I don't think went over all that well. In fact, there was, I think it was 2001. There's one from 2001, the Christmas Carol, the movie. I don't think that went over very well. But I want to share with you maybe the one that I love that not a lot of people probably think about or even appreciate, or maybe even push back on something you said, Mr. Pearce, coming up after the break. And I also want to get your absolute favorite. And I think a lot of people may be surprised a little bit on that one, too. All of that coming up after the break. But, okay, Alberto says Bill Murray was Scrooged. Yes, he was. Totally was. Pretty typical. The Muppets, that's pretty high on the list, most everybody's list. I mean, there's George C. Scott. I mean, there's always that one. But there's one that's not on this list that has already been mentioned in this conversation once that I think needs to be brought up again. All that and more is coming up right after this break. We'll be right back.
Ask a Priest Live, weekdays at 6 p.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross. We'll bring you a different priest each weekday where you can participate in a live Q&A on the topics that matter. To get your question in for Father, call 1-877-511-5483 while the show is live. Email us anytime at priests@thestationofthecross.com or visit our show page at thestationofthecross.com/askapriest.
There's no better way to start your day than with spiritual formation from inspiring priests.
We have no power over the divine law. Furthermore, suppose we did. Suppose John Paul II tomorrow said, all right, bring out your contraceptives. Pull out your scalpels. Unplug the children from their womb. Marry as you please. Unmarry as you please. Fornicate as you please. What would be the difference between the church and the world?
That's Sermons for Everyday Living from 6 to 7 a.m. Eastern on the Station of the Cross.
Hear a powerful sermon you need to share with a loved one? Maybe there's a guest, prayer, or teaching segment that deserves another listen. You can listen to any of our network-produced programs at your convenience by finding us wherever you enjoy podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podbean, and the free iCatholic Radio app. Be uplifted in your faith. Listen today at thestationofthecross.com or on your favorite podcasting platform.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. It's great to be on with you. Joseph Pearce is our guest. jpearce.co is his website. We're going to put a link to it. But in his blog section, he's got an article on Scrooge, and it links over to the American Conservative, and we'll put a link to that as well. Highly recommend you check it out. jpearce.co is his website. Again, we're talking about Ebenezer Scrooge and the various adaptations of A Christmas Carol, and we're getting into now what our favorites are, and there's a lot to choose from here. Rich Little, Albert Finney, Mr. Magoo. I mean, Fred Flintstone has done a film. Jim Carrey. Let's see, Kelsey Grammer's on this list. But there is at least one female on the list that I've seen. Did you know that there was a female adaptation? A lot of people don't, but there's been at least one, probably two or three. There's so many names here. Patrick Stewart's one that's coming up in the chat box quite a bit there. Tim Curry, Michael Caine, Ryan Reynolds, Luke Evans, George C. Scott, Bill Murray, Alistair Sim, Sir Seymour Hicks, Reginald Owen. Alistair Sim is on there twice. He's on there twice. And there's even some that aren't listed that are, I think, on my list. But Joseph Pearce, okay, it's time to let the cat out of the bag, as they say. Who is your favorite version of the Scrooge over the past more than a century now of adaptations?
My favorite is, I'm an Englishman, so you're going to have to permit my bias here. I love the Alistair Sim version from 1951, I think it was, the early 50s. Alistair Sim's a great actor, first of all. He has a comic genius. So he has this sort of... Dickens is great with the grotesque, right? So his characters are somewhat caricatures, and Alistair Sim brings that out greatly. And I love the real key to a good Scrooge, I think, is how he handles Christmas morning when he wakes up and realizes that the spirits have done it all in one night, and he's now a fully fledged convert to the faith, right? He's now a good Christian gentleman. How that's handled, I think, is key. If you do the mean Scrooge well, but you can't do the joyful Christmas morning Scrooge well, you've blown it. And for me, Alistair Sim, when he's got this chuckle, this infectious chuckle, he looks at himself in the mirror and laughs, and he dances around the room. And then when I love the scene when he presents himself to at his nephew's house at the Christmas party, and the beautiful niece who he's neglected. for the whole of her life. He apologizes to her, asks for her forgiveness, and then he pokers with her. Now, and this old man pokering with this beautiful young lady, just it's full of the joy of the season, the joy of the presence of Christ. So for me, Alastair Sim is the one that really achieves that authentic conversion depiction better than the others.
But you spoke highly of George C. Scott and his version too. I think you were surprised by his performance.
Yeah, I mean, I think I approached it again as an Englishman, mea culpa, maxima culpa, with an element of prejudice. The Scrooge is such a quintessentially English character. Dickens is such a quintessentially English author. How could a Yank, how could an American come along and achieve a good Scrooge? And George C. Scott proved me wrong, and I'm delighted that he did, because that's another one that we really enjoy coming back to. And that particular one has my favorite characterization of the ghost of Christmas Present. I can't remember the actor who plays this larger-than-life character in his green Father Christmas outfit, who's just so jolly, so rambunctious, that he really, he got that Chestertonian jollity about him, which seems to be so much part of what an authentic Father Christmas figure, and the Ghost of Christmas Present, that's what he is, should be like. So I love that version too. It's always, we don't normally watch both every year. We watch one or the other. It was an Alastair Sim year this year, so I've been deprived of George C. Scott thus far this year. Probably will be, because we have other Christmas films we want to watch, and we're running out of time. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
Others like it's the year of the dragon at the Pearce house. It's the year of Alastair Sim. I love that. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Michael Caine gets a lot of credit for the Muppets as well. He did a fantastic job. Patrick Stewart, a Shakespearean actor. I think a lot of reviewers would say he did a great job, but the rest of the cast maybe not so much. So, he was carrying the weight there a little bit. But I want to push back a little bit and say, I kind of agree with you in the sense that if I sense that this film is going to be like really, anti-Catholic or really like anti-life or anti-Christian or something like that, I tend to be the same way and not want to watch it. But I have maybe mistakenly, blindly stumbled into some films that I didn't know that was going to be the case. I did like Jim Carrey as Scrooge. I didn't like everything about the film. There's a lot I would say I don't like about the film, and that I would say this is bad. A lot anti-clerical. There was a real sense of being against the men of the cloth kind of a thing. But his comedic timing, his acting ability to bring that character alive, I found that fascinating. I would also say one of my favorite, I would have to say my absolute favorite is The Man Who Invented Christmas, not for the film itself as much as Christopher Plummer playing Scrooge. I thought Christopher Plummer was fantastic as Scrooge in The Man Who Invented Christmas. Did you say you watched that one, or did you avoid it?
No, that's neither. I haven't. I'd like to see it. I've heard good things about it, and I have not yet done so. And what you've just done is to put that at the top of my wish list. It's probably a bit too late to slip a note to Santa at this point for this Christmas. But I'm tempted to try. He can do anything, even last minute. Who knows?
Yeah, it's a great film. We've been watching it every year now for the last several years since it's come out. It's family friendly. It's very well produced. It's an entertaining piece on the history of how the story came to be, but probably also has some issues in it that you're going to want to know. Like, for instance, what we talked about in the last segment about the facts and about Christmas in England during the Victorian era, that kind of thing. But great acting, and Christopher Plummer is fantastic on it. All right, so if you had to choose, if you were going to be alone, deserted on an island, and you could only take one version of Christmas Carol, are you going with Alastair Sim at that point, or what do you got to do?
Yeah, if you're gonna maroon me on a desert island and force me to make such a desperate choice, then I would go for Alastair Sim. I would say though, I was also very pleasantly surprised with the Muppet Christmas Carol. I did not think I would like that. I'm not a fan of the Muppets. I thought it's just going to be trivial at best or trash at worst, and it's neither. And Michael Caine is, I think, brilliant as Scrooge. And of course Kermit the Frog deserves an Oscar for his portrayal of
Fuzzy the Bear playing Fezziwig. A great, obvious choice there. Praise be to Jesus. Do you have? I guess that brings up a question for children's versions. There's lots of animated versions of Scrooge. Mickey Mouse has done, an animated version. Of course, Magoo and the Flintstones did one. I mean, there's been a bunch. Do you have a favorite for children?
Yeah, well, I think these animated ones, the trouble with them, generally speaking, they tend to be a vehicle for the actual show. So in other words, the Fred Flintstone is going to take center stage, not Scrooge. And so that's the problem. But that's where I like the Muppet version. And to answer your question, I would say if the first one to show for children would be the Muppet Christmas Carol. But I would also say that the ones we mentioned, Alastair Sim, George C. Scott, are perfectly suitable for children. So it's not as if you can't show those to the kids. You can. But yeah, which one first? I would say the Muppet Christmas Carol.
Wow. We didn't even mention Guy Pearce as Scrooge, but that was a very dark. I haven't seen it, but it looked, from what I did see, incredibly dark and very macabre and gritty. I'm not sure I'd want to watch that one, but I'd be curious if anybody's seen that. Joseph Pearce, grateful for your time today. What a fun conversation. Scrooge, jpearce.co is the website. Check out the article as well. But Joseph Pearce, God bless you and God love you. Thank you for your time today. Merry Christmas to you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. Merry Christmas to you.
All right. Praise be to God. Check out the show notes at thestationofthecross.com/ACT coming up. We'll stay on the live video feed to take your comments, get your take on A Christmas Carol, Scrooge, or even Fiducia Supplicans. Whatever you want. It's coming up next. God love you. So what did you think of today's show? Let's discuss that right now in the after show. Your take on the after take. Comment, interact live with me and the team. All you need to do is search for one of our live video feeds on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Simply search for the Station of the Cross, Joe McClain, or A Catholic Take. I'm looking forward to seeing you and interacting with you directly. It all starts right now. It's the after show.
And we are back. Welcome to the after show, everyone. And I believe we have our first guest back on with us as well.
All right. You guys invited me back. I'm happy to do it.
I'm glad you're here. Thanks for doing it. Hey, by the way, I see Rob in the comment, Rob Morrow. Rob has written a sequel to Christmas Carol, and it's going to be published, right, Rob? I think
he said next year.
Is it next year or this year that it gets published? I forget. But it sort of speculates on, well, what's the rest of the story of Scrooge's life? So what happens next? How does it all end up? So fascinating speculation.
I'm pretty sure he won't address the question in the book, but the one question I've always had about that is, why didn't the angels who visited him, or the ghosts, point out that he was a usurer? And that
because they're not Catholic.
Why is it that he's rewarded for giving Bob Cratchit a job as a usurer?
Yeah.
At the end. Yeah. But that's because it's a Protestant story. It's not a Catholic story.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
I mean, as a palate cleanser the other day, I was about to tell you, my palate cleanser for the other day was with all this news going around and just some bad movies. My wife and I had watched. Bad meaning you click them on, and you're like, wow, this is awful. What are we watching? Who approved this movie? We put on the Muppet Christmas Carol the other day. My wife loves A Christmas Carol. It's her favorite thing. I, as a joke, had her watch Scrooged, which is not a good movie.
It's not.
But
I had a friend recommend that.
Yeah, it's one of those you don't watch it with your kids, and you should discern if you should watch it or not kind of movies. But
exactly. Yes.
It is peak Bill Murray.
Love it at all. It is peak Bill Murray.
Yeah.
Bill
Murray. I prefer him in Ghostbusters, honestly. Any of the Ghostbusters movies he's in, he's better.
I was a big Bill Murray fan back in my pagan days, and I loved Stripes. I mean, I probably watched Stripes 1,000 times. I think I watched it as a kid in the drive-in movie theater for the first time. So, I was always a Bill Murray fan, but then through my conversion, I'm like, I can't do that anymore. It just doesn't make sense to continue to watch that kind of junk in your brain. It just it does bad things to you psychologically, let alone spiritually. All right, so Dr. Stine, what is your favorite? What is your personal favorite? And maybe you can share your wife's personal favorite version of A Christmas Carol.
I think my wife said her favorite is the Patrick Stewart Christmas Carol movie.
Really?
That's
Okay.
actually that's a surprisingly good one, especially since it was made for TV. But it's Patrick
Well,
Stewart.
so was George C. Scott. That was also a made-for-TV film.
That's
Mm.
in my top 2.
The
And
one I need to
everybody
watch
tends
is
to
the
love that
Alistair Sims one. The one I need to
Yeah.
watch is the Alistair Sims one.
Yeah.
If my wife
I
hadn't
plan on watching
basically-
the 70s version, 1970, that had Albert Finney. I plan on watching that. It's a bit of a musical, kind of like the Frasier, Kelsey Grammer, 2004 Christmas Carol musical. I want to say the 70 version, 1970 Scrooge with Albert Finney, is also a bit of a musical. I intend to watch that this year. Jake, what you got to put your cards on the table? What's your favorite?
It's pretty basic. I'm with Joe Pearce. I like the Alistair Sim, and I like
you're a traditionalist.
and the George C. Scott. Yes, the George C. Scott.
You're a purist. Got it.
The George C. Scott one. Not only is he a fantastic actor, but the score is just perfect. Nick Picot's score. There's the song at the end, and it gets stuck in my head every Christmas, just because of the mood and the air, the snow, and everything. I was like, why is this not like a Christmas classic song? It's so good.
It's so good.
So good.
I will.
But anyway,
I will defend a more modern one that never comes up in these conversations, and that is the Disney Christmas Carol with Mickey Mouse. The reason that one is so good is the actor who did Scrooge McDuck. It's where he got a start and he ended up playing Scrooge for like 40 years or something.
Mm-hmm.
But also, as an interesting aside, it's the only one I've ever seen that shows Scrooge when he's being confronted in that climax of the Ghost of Christmas Future, and he is being shown the pits and the fires of hell to scare him straight as the final punch in the gut that he needs to straighten his life up. Props to Disney for that, because that was made during the beginning of the so-called Disney Renaissance. And I say so-called because my daughter loves Cinderella and she loves all the, Walt era Disney princess movies we've let her see. But if you watch the so-called Disney Renaissance ones, it's like these are the Disney princesses who are softly feminist. Go listen to Belle from Beauty and the Beast, just sort of insult pastoral life and, the caricature of traditional masculinity that is the villain of that movie. Those movies are kind of troubling in a way. Not as bad as current Disney by any stretch, but the same people who made that are the ones who also made the Christmas Carol with Mickey Mouse. That's a fantastic telling of it for kids.
Yeah. Yep. That's a classic for sure. Let's see here. A lot of people are saying Rowan Atkins is Scrooge. That might be interesting. What did you guys think?
He's a better actor than people give him credit for.
Rowan Atkins? Yeah, of course. I like Rowan Atkins.
Comedic actors usually are better actors than people give them credit for.
Their timing is so good. Flying Tigers, Rob says, Ghost of Christmas Love is the title of the forthcoming sequel. And when is it is it released next year, Rob? Is it next year, 2024? Got to be at this point, right? Groundhog Day. Yeah, we're talking about Bill Murray. Groundhog Day is such a Bill Murray classic. Such a classic.
It is.
But again, I don't think I can watch that one anymore either. I just can't. I can't.
I don't know if there's anything in that movie. Is there anything objectionable in that movie?
Premarital sex in that one.
Oh, there is. Yeah.
It's unfortunate because so much of that movie is great.
He's basically using and abusing her to get her.
It sounds like it's really the. It sounds like what you need in that movie for that is like a VidAngel version of that movie.
Yes, exactly. Perfect. So, as supreme ruler of the universe, I would mandate by pain of death that every movie should be able to be filtered. Because, golly gee whiz, if people don't want to watch that nonsense, then who are you to force it down their throat? You know what I mean? Like they should.
My $1 billion idea is to create a streaming service that has officially licensed and sanctioned versions of films that are made for TV cuts.
That's a brilliant idea.
Old made for TV cuts. Even if we get the old made for TV cuts of movies where the guy's about to blaspheme or something, and you get just some corny, completely wrong cadence, probably different voice actor, overdubbing what he said, and it just is kind of jarring. I would still rather see that version of the movie.
Yeah, 100%. I like VidAngel though. My problem is if I had George Soros kind of money, I would create a Catholic organization that provides those services, and I wouldn't just rely on the Mormons. Instead of a VidAngel Angel Studios that all these Catholic filmmakers are now flocking to make their projects, where's the Catholics? There should be a Catholic production house that can be turnkey for Catholic filmmakers to come and create great stories and support each other in the process. Like it blows my mind that we have to all flock to the Mormons to get that done. Like, no, sorry. If there are any Catholic rich people on this stream, your hard-earned money, your wealth, your resources could go in 10x impact on society if you leverage it for Orthodox, solid, amazing Catholic projects. And
you're saying that even though we'd all love to work for that company, but none of us have to. We'd be happy to see it appear on the landscape and be successful.
Bingo, exactly. It's 100%. It's a production house, because right now there are a lot of Catholic small-time movie makers that will show up to Angel Studios, and it's a turnkey operation. You literally have to show up with a script. That's it. They have actors, cameras, lights.
That's why Cabrini was being put out by either of them. Wasn't Cabrini being put out by that company or a similar company?
Well, so you got Sound of Freedom and Cabrini, made by the same people. But what happened was they went to Angel Studios for the distribution component, which is the other thing that company also provides, which is, again, I don't fault the Mormons for doing what they're doing. I don't obviously agree with their theology. They're wrong. They need to become Christians and Catholic in particular. But the point is, they're stepping out in faith, doing what they believe in. So hats off to them for that. And they're doing it in a level that's head and shoulders above everybody else, because they have proven with their Mormon theology through Chosen that they can distribute to millions and millions and millions and millions of people and make a ton of cash, which is why Mormons are fighting over who gets that money in court right now. I don't know if you guys knew that, but that's definitely the case. So it's a Mormon project.
I like to pretend
Catholics
Chosen doesn't
are now
exist.
going there. Yeah, me too.
Because
hey, Dory,
because a lot of people go watch that movie and watch Our Lady have birth pains and other things, and I'm just like, no. I'm like, I can't endorse that.
Dory says, call Mel Gibson. Do you got his number?
Right.
I don't have his number, and I'm sure he wouldn't take my call if I had his number, but I'd call him if I had it. I'd love to talk to Mel Gibson someday. But if Mel Gibson was going to do this idea, he would have already done it. I'm sure he's thought about it a billion times. In some ways, he might say, Joe, that's exactly what I've done with my organization, because he does have a production company. If I talk to Mel, the one thing I want to talk to Mel about, if I got one chance to talk to Mel, I'd want to talk to him about Apocalypto. There needs to be a sequel. It needs to include Hernan Cortez.
I was going to say, doesn't Apocalypto show at the end the Spanish ships are arriving on the horizon?
Yeah,
ending their world.
Well, there's the dinghy. The boat is docked in the harbor, and the dinghy is headed to shore, and there's a Spaniard there. So that's where it ends. I loved Apocalypto. It's very gruesome and gritty, so I don't love that. But at the same time, it's depicting something that's horrible. So the context,
right?
Is there.
I've said before that if I don't object that a movie aimed at an adult audience, if it's going to have violence as clearly part of the story, if the violence is depicted in a realistic way.
Context,
as long as it's very clear who right. Don't glorify it, but if you got a guy who's going to get hit in the face with a Morning Star, you might not want to have the guy just get a bruise, because that's not what those things did to people.
That's right. Yeah. Tim H says they showed Albert Finney go to hell at the end. Okay, praise be to God. So that's awesome. Mike K, good morning to you. Janice, good morning to you. James, by the way, is brand new in the group. James, welcome to the team. Glad you're on the team. Kathy, good morning to you. Kathleen, good morning. Damon, good morning. I like the meme. The Alistair Sim meme is very good. Janice and Jack Burton, Jack Burton, tweet into. Cindy K, good morning to you. Mateus, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Glad you guys are here.
I would do whatever to hop into your chat, because I love sharing memes. But the ones that I've been sharing lately have been in a lot of people's comment sections on Facebook, because they're mocking some of the Pope-splaining going on with this new papal document. People are trying to parse the difference between a couple and the persons in the couple.
Right.
It's like,
yes,
the greater the mental gymnastics you have to go into to defend something, the more wrong you probably are.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
By
the way, James is on the board for George C. Scott. Although his second place would be Scrooge McDuck. What about nobody likes Mr. Magoo? I mean, I thought Mr. Magoo did a fine job as Scrooge.
I've not seen the Mr. Magoo one.
But clearly, everyone's opinion is wrong if it doesn't say that Christopher Plummer was the greatest Scrooge ever. So, sorry, that's all I can offer you.
What year was that movie?
The Man Who Invented Christmas is.
That one. Okay.
It is a fantastic film. Really love it.
Yeah, that's a relatively new one.
Very new. Christopher Plummer, obviously before he died, played.
That was one of those newer movies. That was a newer movie that I saw that I was surprised that I liked. Sort of like several years ago when that Christopher Robin movie came out. I think my wife and I went to see that in the theater, or we rented it expecting a train wreck, and we were pleasantly surprised.
Really?
Like, wow, this is actually surprisingly decent. So,
you talking about the Winnie the Pooh thing?
Yeah, where Christopher Robin has grown up and he goes and fights in World War II or something. And he's sort of a jaded post-war insurance salesman or something.
Is that the one with Ewan McGregor in it? Is that Ewan McGregor? Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I gotta go watch
that. Looked cute.
It was surprisingly decent.
Yeah.
It reminds me that Disney was, until very recently, capable of making decent things. Yeah. Right. And the reason they aren't anymore is because they hired a bunch of lunatics to do all their writing, and then they imposed this program called Reimagine Tomorrow, which is essentially we are going to become an activist company and somehow expect to still make billion-dollar movies.
Kevin Phillips
took 3 years for that to destroy them.
Kevin Phillips says Gibson as Scrooge, Caviezel as Bob Cratchit, and Mark Wahlberg as a ghost. I would need VidAngel filters to watch that film. It would be so riddled with.
Probably.
It would be like the Father Stew 2.0. It would just be riddled with curse words.
I watched an action movie that Jim Caviezel was the bad guy in, and he was dropping F-bombs in it.
All the time.
Because it fit the character. Yeah.
I mean,
because it fit the character. The character was also one of the better depictions of Satan I'd ever seen, who wasn't Satan himself. But
kind of like violence, sex, language, violence, if they're within a context, it can be understood. However,
I've never seen an on-screen sex scene that needs to be there.
Well, yeah,
I've never seen one.
My preference would be if you had to depict something like that, suggest it, don't show it. Right?
The old 1950s, knowing wink and a nudge and a bedroom door shown, and that's it. And then
that's all you need. You don't need more than that. You don't need more than that. But at the same time, even when it's in context, I still prefer to watch those films with VidAngel filters, so I don't have to have that constant barrage of language thrown at my face, in my ears, in my head. You know what I mean? It's like I just don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
So I cut it out all day long. I may even leave some of the more graphic violence that might be in the film, depending on the context that's involved. But I definitely don't want to hear the language, and I definitely don't want to blaspheme, especially. And then, because now anymore, I just can't take a lot of blaspheming anymore. Like even YouTube videos, if they're taking the Lord's name in vain, I can't do this, and I'm done, and I have to go away.
Yeah, it's why it's hard when you watch mostly like secular content creators. I don't watch a lot of Catholic content creators on YouTube, mostly because. Why would I want to watch people that I disagree with? Like, yeah, maybe you could say I have a professional obligation to know what the Pope splainers are saying. And the people I agree with, I don't want to accidentally rip off their ideas. So I watch limited amounts of what they do.
I just give them credit. I don't mind stealing from you all day long,
right.
Anthony Stine. I watch your videos before every show. And then I'm like, oh, Anthony Stine's covering this. This is so good.
Tomorrow, my live stream tomorrow, I'm going to have to mention that the title of this document, whose name I can never pronounce properly. I'll have to look it up right before I go live, and then write it out phonetically. The document's official. It has an official translation, but the Latinists say that there's another translation that describes the sin of the flesh being blessed, essentially. In that
gotta
document.
Be kidding.
Oh, I am not kidding you. It is. It is one of those it's down the list of potential translations, and as the podcaster I was listening to saying this said, if you think that's a coincidence, you'd be deluding yourself, basically. And the person who said it is Novus Ordo Watch, who I am not a sedevacantist, and I don't really like it when they call people who aren't, their particular brand of sedevacantist fake Catholics or false trads or whatever, but their news reporting is pretty solid when they're talking about news stuff, and I would imagine that the Latinist he checked this with was top notch. So. Wow. Because he has on the Novus Ordo Watch website some papal documents, anti-modernist papal documents that were never translated into English, and he's got them in English, and very good English.
Mm-hmm. Yikes. These are very interesting times we live in, which is why I published a documentary film on the subject. Because it's decision time, right? It's decision time. You got to make a decision. Where are you going to be on all this? So, because if you wait until this gets worse, the answer is you're going to be a secular humanist. You're going to just abandon Christianity.
Or you're going to go join like the East, which are heretical, by the way. They're not just schismatic. They are heretical.
Yeah.
You deny the primacy of the Roman pontiff. You deny the Immaculate Conception and the Ascension of Our Lady. Guess what you are? You are a heretic. I hate to be the one to tell you this. You might be the best of the heretics because you have the sacraments. It's great. But I want to get your take on this because you are one of the more reasonable voices who is generally correct on most things while not thinking too highly of your own opinions, because it means you're sensible.
You've been talking to my producer again. I can tell.
Yeah. But there's this rumor floating that that rumor about a coadjutor pope has come back.
I heard you report on this, and I actually brought this up, and I gave you credit for reporting on this as well. And I also pointed out that maybe it's changed. I'd love to know that this could just be a ploy to figure out where the leak was, where the mole in the house is.
I tend to think that still, but after this document, I have to wonder. Because if Francis really thinks that he has a limited amount of time left,
it's
like if somebody in my patron Discord, somebody in there this morning, right after my live stream, said, "Hey, wasn't this topic supposed to be revisited by the Synod in October?"
Yeah.
So
think about it.
Why issue a document now?
I asked when I was in Rome, I asked this question to Edward Penton. How do you feel? You wrote the book on potential, who the next pope could be. You gave us bios and all these people, and what do you think? Have you changed your opinion? What do you think? Edward Penton said to me, "You'll be surprised. A lot of these modernist, middle of the road, liberal type of bishops that are now cardinals, they don't have the stomach for this. They don't have the gall. They don't have the courage. They don't have the backbone. They're go along to get along. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want the stress. So they might surprise you in how they vote because they don't want to see what we're seeing now continue on because it's just too much for them. Even if they do agree theologically speaking, philosophically speaking with this insanity, they may surprise you. And I'm like, that's hopeful, I guess. That's good. Praise be to God. So if Edward Penton knows that,
my concern is on moderate, though.
Well, if Edward Penton says that, and by the way, he wasn't the only one who said that to me. There was a few people who said that to me actually when I was in Rome. If they're thinking that, then Pope Francis isn't dumb. The people he has around him aren't dumb. They're just crazy. But crazy and dumb aren't equal. They're smart. Right. They know, and it's what's his name? The British journalist that works for the Spectator. He got kicked off of the Catholic Herald. His name is escaping me off the top of my head. He's on Twitter all the time.
Damian Thompson or something?
Damian Thompson. When I interviewed Damian Thompson a few years ago, he told me that when he had spent a week at Santa Marta at the Vatican Hotel there, and he would bump into the Pope in the cafeteria, and we were talking about that. And I'm like, why do you think he's living in the hotel? Why doesn't he live in the Vatican apartments? The story is that they're too plush, they're too extravagant. And he's like, no, they're not. They're simple. They're not extravagant at all. In fact, they spent millions of donated dollars to renovate the hotel so the Pope could live there, very poshly.
Yeah.
He goes. So I said, why is he there? And Damian Thompson said to me, because he's a godfather and he needs to know what's going down. He needs to hear those rumors in the cafeteria. He needs to see who's walking around, who's saying what, who's doing what. He needs to know what's going down. And when he said that to me, it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I was just like, we are in.
And people like that, I'm going to tell you, people like that are not above trying to rig a conclave. This is why the Cardinal Ghirlanda rumor is something that I would not dismiss entirely. Even if the Jesuit who we're talking about, Ghirlanda, came out and said, "Oh, we're not planning to put laity involved in the conclave process, up to 25% of the voting body being laity, handpicked laity and religious." Yeah. don't put it past them to do that, because it could very well be that the only way they get the Pope they want is to stack the deck completely.
Yeah.
And then here's the other part. We've had a lot of bishops getting canceled, and Cardinal Burke being sanctioned, essentially. A motu proprio could be very well in the works that says if you have been sanctioned as a cardinal and deprived of privileges, you no longer can participate or be eligible in the conclave.
Well, I
Imagine
reported
that.
today that Beccio still has his apartment, still paying a cheap rate. He's not paying market rates for his apartment, even though he's a convicted criminal. Let that sink in for a second. By the way, Alberto says Joe Pesci as Pope Francis. Could you imagine? I mean, I amuse you? Do I make you laugh? That would be hilarious. Somebody somewhere should take that scene and impose Pope Francis's face on it. You know, like just do the whole animated thing. That would be hilarious. That'd be so fun to watch. And then maybe Burke on what's his name's head. That'd be kind of fun.
I can't imagine Burke laughing quite like that.
Flying Tigers. Rob Morrow says they could be setting up Tucho Fernandez as Francis II. Yeah, it could happen. I wouldn't be surprised.
The best thing for the church would be an ultra-Orthodox traditionalist that you're not ever going to have this side of, mushroom clouds, basically, or another radical modernist who wakes people up and shakes a lot of these modernists, these semi-modernist bishops out of their slumber. A lot of the go-along to get along bishops who, they parrot the dialogue and accompaniment stuff. They have a liberal interpretation of the hermeneutic of continuity, all that stuff. Those guys, they need to be woken up. And that's why Fernandez would be probably your ideal one, although I keep throwing the name Hollerich out there to give people nightmares. He's the guy, he's the Luxembourg cardinal, who's very, very pro-gay stuff. He makes no pretense.
Yeah, you are.
This is the issue that could wake people up.
Tim H., I used to think we could be friends, but now you've said An American Christmas Carol with Henry Winkler is good. I don't think we can do this anymore, Tim. I got to be honest with you. I mean, Henry Winkler as
my
Scrooge,
wife likes that one.
Does she really? Come on. He was the Fonz at the time. Which
she likes Henry Winkler. She likes.
I liked Henry Winkler as the Fonz, only to discover that he hated riding. He couldn't ride the motorcycle. He had to fake the scenes. I mean, like what? You break my heart, Winkler.
That'd be like Harrison Ford admitting he couldn't use a whip to save his life. You keep that to yourself.
Mm-hmm. You just right. These things you don't share. They die with you. They go to your grave. So he's been forever burned in my mind, Henry Winkler. If I go on to X, going back to like Fiducius, whatever that Supplicans, I don't even know how to say that. It's funny. I can't say people's names correctly. I can't pronounce locations. I barely speak English, and people are throwing this stuff at me all the time.
Same. Like I in my live stream about Cardinal Gregory last week or the week before, I mentioned that I kind of poked fun at him because he's a cardinal archbishop of the church who presumably went through seminary and theology formation, and his Latin was worse than mine. And I had somebody who hates me in the comments going, no, your Latin is the worst. You have no room to mock him. I'm like, no, I do have room to mock him.
What gets me though is
if I wanted to mock him, I call him the Queen of the Nile in my show, but I can't. I won't do that. That's his nickname, though.
As I go through the Twitter verse, and you go through the Twitter feed, which is where a lot of this nonsense happens, and it just boggles the mind how people are like, was it the day before yesterday? Maybe it was. I think it was. I saw some of these. They're good people. I want to be charitable. They're not bad Catholics. They're well-meaning, well-intended Catholics. They just don't want to ever think bad about the Pope. I mean, who does? Who wants to wake up today and go, I can't wait to talk trash about the Pope? Like, not me. I have defended the pontificate with my Protestant family for the last 2 decades. So it's painful being the only Catholic in my family and being rejected because of my Catholic faith. I mean, I quite literally rejected to have to also at the same time, because you want to be true, right? You want to be honest. You want to have integrity. That the guy who holds that office now, and yes, I said the guy who holds the office because I'm not a sedevacantist, is doing damage to Holy Mother Church. He'll be judged for that. There are millstones being carved right now. You can hear the carving going on. God, I'll pray for him. Pray for him, because if you don't, nobody else will. And hell is real, and people go there, including popes. So when I look through the Twitterverse and I see this sort of like naive pushback. Oh, you've not read the document. He didn't approve blessing same-sex. It says literally blessing of same-sex unions.
We're just going through Remorse Laetitia 2.0.
Yeah, no, 10.0. I mean, look, good grief. This is on steroids. This is cat out of the bag. By the way, the cat, fun reference, the cat refers to the cat of nine tails, and it was held in a bag. George Washington observed this when the British were occupying New York and he was across the way. The English army, to punish its own soldiers for raping citizens, would beat their soldiers with a cat of nine tails, and it was kept in a bag, and it was so bloody that the bag turned crimson. So when the cat came out of the bag,
good on them for doing that. Good on them for that punishment.
Happened. Yeah, for
hey,
sure.
Hey, you're not allowed to say, this is America. You're not allowed to say good things about the Royal Army.
Merca. But like,
don't you know any better?
It's so mind-boggling to me to see. By the way, there is FSSB is being kicked out of a diocese in France. That's being reported this morning. So good times. Good times. And I guess the Diocese of Charlotte's.
What diocese was that?
This is the French. I'll put it on my screen so you can see where I'm getting it from. The French Diocese of Quimper has decided to ask the fraternity of St. Peter to leave points of tension with traditionalists within the diocese without blaming the FSSP priests, asked diocesan priests to take over pastoral care for traditional Catholics. I mean, are there no Novus Ordo parishes? Can we not just get rid of the surplus population of traditionalists in the diocese in time for Christmas? You know, an excuse to pick the pocket of the bishop every 25th of December?
I will tell you that the
Scrooge action.
I would thought that might be the seminary that, or not the seminary, the diocese that I've been reporting on out of France, but it's not. And the reason is, I'm going to give you a bit of a scoop here to pay attention for probably tomorrow. Okay. I'm hoping that my source gets back to me because I have a video made for it already that I'll happily delete and then add an edit in. But there's the seminary. So you remember Bishop Ray in the Diocese of Réau-Toulon, however you say that. Remember that story? He was given a coadjutor bishop because he was too friendly to tradition. We're talking the story of Dom Alcuin Reed, that whole saga.
Yeah.
He got a new auxiliary bishop. Or not auxiliary bishop, a coadjutor bishop, who was in charge of everything important that a bishop does. So this is not let me assist you. No, he's in charge of those things. Yeah. And a lot of good people on our side looked at that bishop, were familiar with him, or said, hey, this is a good guy, friendly tradition, yada, yada, yada. Okay. I had a bad feeling about it, but I kept my mouth shut at the time. I got an inside scoop from a seminarian in that diocese. That bishop, good to tradition, friendly tradition, has just banned the seminarians from attending the Latin Mass.
Not
entirely
surprised.
Banned. Completely banned.
Wow.
They are banned from it, and if they want the Mass in Latin, they have to go to a Novus Ordo once a week on Wednesday, if a priest is available who can offer the Novus Ordo in Latin. Now, why is that even a question? That's besides the fact that this isn't the difference in the liturgy between the Novus Ordo and the TLM are light years of difference between the two, not just the language. But there's a lot more to it. But I don't need to tell you that, but people listening may not know that the Novus Ordo is not the same as the traditional Latin Mass, except in Latin, and the priest not facing you. There's a lot of difference. Some liturgical scholars have said there's maybe a 7% overlap between the two. It means 7% of things are in common. The rest are entirely different.
Would St. John Vianney be okay with that? Give us a little bit more time there, Jake. Would St. John Vianney be okay with that? Therese of Lisieux? I mean, would she be all right with that? I mean, there's so many French saints. Saint Joan of Arc. Whew, what would Joan of Arc do? Whew, man, talk about burn it down, pun intended. She may burn it down. I mean, there's a lot of great saints in the church that we all love and revere, and we like reading about their stories and reading their books and the authors that write about them all the time. We love them, but stop to think about how incredible, heroic, and amazing these saints actually were. Number one. Number two, how they wouldn't put up with this stuff. They just wouldn't. They wouldn't put up with it. And their lives are exemplary examples of that very point. And here we are.
Are you hearing any whispers of a consistory, by the way?
No, but on that vein, and to sort of also tie into what you just said. So one thing I was just thinking about. So you just gave us an example of a diocese that got a coadjutor bishop, and now that bishop's in charge, and now that agenda has been pushed forward in that diocese. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Francis could easily, there's an example right here where he could easily say, hey, I'm getting old, my health isn't great, so I'm going to need a coadjutor to help me do my job. The question I think that could be brought up, not only could that be pushed back against in general, but just go down the rabbit hole here with me. Isn't that what Benedict did?
Sort of.
Here's
a better idea.
Get himself a coadjutor bishop, and you know what I mean? Like, but I guess in that, going down that rabbit hole with that example in particular, could we say then that if the Pope is going to get himself an assistant partner bishop to help him with his job, and he goes into kind of a retirement mode, can the church rightfully demand that a conclave be held and that be elected and not just appointed? Do you see what I'm saying?
Let me give you a nightmare scenario here.
Oh,
the nightmare scenario. Yeah, the nightmare scenario is using the methods of modernists.
You're going to say Guy Pearce as Scrooge, aren't you? You're going to say Guy Pearce as Scrooge as the nightmare scenario.
No. I would say if I wanted to go that route, I'd probably be more like Marlon Wayans as Scrooge. But yeah.
Didn't he do one?
Medea's a Christmas
He might
Carol?
have, but his was for comedy, so he gets a pass. If he did, was a comedy, so he gets a pass. Yeah. I mean, like, Marlon Wayans did a straight role as Scrooge.
Yeah.
But here's your nightmare scenario. Using the methodology of the modernists. Remember, the modernists tell us that they're going back to the ancient church for things.
Mm-hmm.
And everything they do is in the ancient church. So they go back to the pornocracy on this one. And they say, well, this pope here had a coadjutor bishop, had a coadjutor pope. And so I, looking to the sacred tradition in line with my predecessor, Pius III, or whatever, whoever it was of venerable memory, appoint Cardinal Tuco Fernandez as my coadjutor bishop, who will have right of automatic succession to the papacy in line with this clearly outlined precedent. And then for the first time since 1954, he makes it infallible that this is how it's done.
Yeah.
What happens then? Will the people who have the authority to say, hey, maybe he's not actually the Pope, actually speak up at that point? Because the reason I cannot come out and tell you, I don't call him anti-Pope Francis, because that I feel like is above my pay grade.
Yeah, mine too.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
So, people keep looking for Cardinal Burke to make that declaration, weirdly they ask him to, because he's honestly one of the more moderate of the traditional leaning bishops. He really is.
So is
compared
Mueller.
Yeah,
Cardinal
Mueller. Yeah, they're
yeah.
Schneider is much more traditionalist than Burke is. At least reading their writings, he seems much more so. And the test on that is their attitudes towards the SSPX and their willingness to look at the documents of Vatican II and say, no, there actually is a problem in those documents, not just how they're implemented. How they look at those two questions is really how you differentiate where people are on these things. But would anybody speak up aside from the outrage that I'd have to report on, which means I would inevitably be part of fanning the flames of, even if I don't want to be? Would, aside from laymen and a few decent bishops, do you think anybody with any position power to say, no, you can't do that? And even then, what would happen? What are they going to do? Hold their own, mirror conclave?
Yeah. Well, we've seen that before.
Elect a pope to have to rule out of the diocese of out of the Holy See of Tyler, Texas. Probably not.
And no, not anymore. That's gone. That ship has sailed. We've seen it before, obviously, right? Where cardinals get together and they elect a competing pope. Let's just say. And then obviously that has to be worked out. The benefit in those days was you didn't have social media to spread that far and wide to scandalize every Catholic on planet Earth as fast as possible. So they only learned about it in hindsight in a lot of occasions. They're like, oh, really? Oh, wow. If they learned about it at all. Whereas today...
Yeah, the most attentive of them would go, hey, wait, who's that guy's name being said in the canon of the Mass? And that's it.
Yeah,
That's like the only way to know.
Like, wait, who was that? One more time. So, I mean, a lot has changed in that regard alone. But I've been saying it is above my pay grade. You know, I don't get the right to choose to decide these things. God did not put that on me or most 99.99% of all human persons on planet Earth. We don't possess that. So I don't have to answer for it, and I don't get to be responsible for it. Praise be to God. Trust me when I tell you I got enough problems of my own. However, I also have said it's when the cardinals say we can't do this anymore, and then they start doing things like holding their own little synods, and then they are starting to come out and say he is not the Pope. I mean, Vigano, Archbishop Vigano said some seriously crazy things that, I mean, to a lot of people, they sound crazy. To some, they sound normal and fine and whatever. But my point being, he can say whatever he wants. He's a retired archbishop. His opinion of that doesn't go any further than yours or mine. He may be more well-informed than you and I possibly, have better sources and contacts and insider information, to be sure. But his opinion at the end of the day is only an opinion. He's not a cardinal.
You know what he said, though? Do you know what he said? He said this online, via Zoom or something, but he said this to the face of Dr. Mazza and
who I'm going to have on back on my program, actually, in a couple of weeks.
Unless I'm mistaken, he told them that we are not that we cannot declare Francis to be an anti-pope. That's not our job, he said.
Yeah. But I guess my point is,
because that was not the trajectory he looked like he was taking.
Exactly. And I'm going to make that point too when I have Mazza on. I think January 2nd, Mazza is coming back. But my
go
point
back
is,
and review the text of that. It's on his website. It's on the Exerge Domine website in English. He has an official English translation.
But I guess my point is, we can all have opinions, but it's when the cardinals start to take action and the cardinals come out, like Cardinal Zen, Mueller, Burke, you name the cardinal, not a single one has called him an anti-pope or not the pope or, not a single one. All of them. Burke got kicked out of his apartment. Still, he calls Francis His Holiness. So that's my point is when that changes, that's a paradigm shift. We are definitely in brand new territory if that does happen. And I think it will at some point. And it will be, I think that's when life truly gets hard. Because the civil war within the church will be, as they say, the cat is out of the bag, and there's bad things are about to happen. Right now,
this is why I think the moderate is the worst choice. Though.
It's a scrimmage right now. The Twitter scrimmage is all it is now. Varying opinions, but when cardinals come out and say we declare him not to be the Pope, you're going to need more than just the Ukrainian bishops electing Vigano. You're going to need the cardinals to do it,
right?
And when that happens, bad things happen too.
I'll tell you why I think the moderate is the worst choice. Because the moderate is going to be the one. If a moderate follows Francis, he is not going to want to correct almost anything he did. Right. He's going to, by definition, be go along to get along. And you will not see the Curia cleaned out of the Tobins and Farrells and the Fernandezes. You're not going to see those guys gotten rid of. Except maybe when they're retired, then they put another moderate in. That's the problem. And the other problem is people will go back to sleep. Because I have the unpopular position that Benedict was a moderate. Because in the grand scheme of things, he was.
Yeah, he was.
I have pointed out to people, he once gave an address on climate change talking about the need for international political authority to impose climate-related sanctions. That was Benedict who did that. Okay.
Thanks for that.
He and Francis have a lot more in common than people want to accept. So I wrote my doctoral dissertation on the church's response to climate change.
The bubble was burst for me after he went into retirement and more on the scandals were coming out. And it just, I mean, he obviously prosecuted several bishops and priests and all that. He's obviously done way more than Pope Francis has done, as far as that goes. But like to your point, I mean, he left us high and dry, in my opinion. What was I going to say? There was something I was going to say and I forgot. And now it slipped my mind. Diane points out, Diane says, I struggle with charity towards Pope Francis, so I have to pray for him for the good of my own soul. Exactly. That is our job, to pray for even our enemies, right? And I don't know.
That's actually how you avoid becoming a Pharisee.
I don't know how Pope Francis lands on the perspective there for any of you, but out of charity, out of love for him, we should pray, fast, and do penance for him. And I've kind of made that part of my Advent journey, so to speak, is to pray for Pope Francis in particular, because hell is real and people go there. And the kind of division. And even if you say, but Joe, he's never formally taught heresy, even if that's your opinion, I'm not a theologian. I can't be the judge of that. I can only point out what is clearly problematic, obviously, even to knuckle draggers like me. But at the end of the day, you don't even have to make that argument. You don't have to make the argument whether or not he's clearly is technically taught heresy or not. He has played with fire and people are being burned. The consequences of his ambiguity is relevant. It is obvious, and it is causing even more damage. And this latest round of this document is example of that.
The funny thing about this conversation to me is that what radicalized me really was two things. First was Amoris Laetitia, but that's because the church's teaching on marriage was what the thing that really brought me ultimately to walk away from high-functioning agnosticism. I feel like a fraud calling it high-functioning because the more I think about it, it wasn't really high-functioning at all. It's more cowardly agnosticism, which is a redundancy. But the other thing was the other thing that radicalized me was the Pachamama debacle. And it wasn't just the Pachamama thing. That's by itself horrific. It's why I also I'm not a fan of like John Paul II the way a lot of people are. It's because I can't look at these CC conferences and not just say, well, that's just Pachamama 1.0. That's just first version of that. But what really radicalized me with Francis was like people who've been listening to me a long time. Nope, I can't help but notice that my tone changed in late 2019 after Fratelli Tutti was issued, because that document was a love letter to globalism, to global technocracy, which is all just a fancy way of saying, velvet gloved global communism. That's what that document was. All in the name of the environment. That's what Laudato Deum was. That's what Laudato Si was. All that stuff. And it's gotten more radical as time goes on. The conferences at the Vatican with Jeffrey Sachs. There's this guy on Twitter who was like a global economist, who's a Catholic, who has books written with Jeffrey Sachs writing the introduction to them. Like, Jeffrey Sachs is a eugenicist, okay? Like, he's a guy who thinks there are too many people on Earth. He wants to get rid of the useless eaters. And weirdly, the useless eaters are not among the coterie. Yeah. He's a modern Scrooge.
Exactly. That's where we're at. And they embrace that. Yet Cardinal Zinn didn't get an audience. Cardinal Burke gets kicked to the curb. Strickland gets fired. I mean, it's clear based on these choices. Again, you don't have to be a theologian. You don't have to be a philosopher. You don't have to be smart. This is obvious. It's so obvious what's going down here. And so many Catholics are still in this, I can't admit anything wrong. We have got to stop with this stuff. I mean, we call them pope-splainers, but I put them in a different category. Pope-splainers are the kinds of people who know the truth and they are intentionally spinning it the other way. There's a bigger category of like your Catholic from your parish that just can't come to grips with anything wrong coming out of the Vatican. They're Montanist type of Catholics. They just can't grip mentally with that issue, so they don't. They're in that sort of what we call the Trump syndrome, the deranged Trump syndrome. It's kind of like that, but with Francis. Syndrome, yeah. They don't mean any ill intent. They don't want any harm or civil war or conflict. It's just they can't wrap their heads around it. Those people, this is going to be the category, in my opinion, is going to get worse. When the next shoe drops, when cardinals come out and say, you know what, we're done. He has crossed the line. We can't do this anymore. That's when it's going to be about the conclave. That's when the all-out war breaks out.
There's a 0% chance they're not doing something about the conclave. 0% chance.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but when it happens... The problem is
they have to find that courage. They got to find that backbone to do it. But when they do, it's total civil war within the church. And there's a lot of people who are going... there's a lot more than just SSPX that are going to feel ostracized. I mean,
I don't even think of it anymore I don't even think about the liturgical wars anymore.
Yeah, neither do I.
If another document came out tomorrow, I'd be blindsided by it. I'd be totally surprised because we are now entering. If Francis's time really is almost up, then we are entering endgame. An endgame for this is how do they keep it going after him? Because look, I have been looking at the meddling of the U.S. government into the affairs of the Vatican, and there's evidence that they've been doing this for decades. And the Podesta email leaks in 2013, the Vati leaks, all that stuff, the WikiLeaks stuff, all that points to that they were meddling in the conclave. and with Benedict. What makes people think they wouldn't do it again? The people who were doing the meddling are much more brazen now than they were before then. They just got Trump thrown off the ballot in Colorado. I'm not a big Trump guy, but there are people who don't like Trump in Colorado who are disturbed by this because it means the government is now telling you who you can vote for. Those people
exactly
are doing that in public. So what do you think their influence is going to be that they're trying to put on Rome now? I would bet money that Francis has been given a list of names of people who would be acceptable to follow him. And if Fernandez isn't on that list, I'd be shocked.
Well, who do you think put the list together? Fernandez. I mean, he's his ghostwriter. He's his bestie. They're BFFs. So I'm sure Fernandez writes the list, and I'm sure he puts his own name at the top of that list. Yikes.
Whoever thought we would get a writer of erotic poetry would become the guy in charge of defending the integrity of the faith.
Yeah,
well, that's where we are, and
that's where we are.
That's why I keep saying point to the conclave. I there's that part of me that hopes if they're going to go the modernist, they give us Tagle. At least we'll have a good few. We'll have some laughs at just the clown show that it'll be, because we've all seen the footage of Tagle, haven't we? Where he's at the World Youth Day hanging out with teenagers, rapping with them. Like, it will be absurd. It'll be at least entertaining. The descent into utter madness and the eventual probably invasion by Russia of Western Europe. At least it'll be entertaining when we get there. But if it's Fernandez, it's going to be brutal because he is smart and he doesn't pull punches, and he knows how to use that weaponized ambiguity and that initiative. Hence why there have been 5 dubia answered in the last 4 months.
Wow. That's where we're at. What are we going to do when we get there? When we get to total civil war? That's the question. We better figure that out now and not wait till we get to that moment to decide, because by then it'll be too late. The stress will be too high, and the temptation to kind of go along with that agenda will be too much. And many people are going to actually end up in that category. So my answer is be holy, be faithful, be zealous. Like I said in the film and that I put out, at the end of the day, when the Lord comes, whenever he does come, whether it's in my lifetime or not, I want to be found being faithful. That's it. Just be. That's the only thing that matters. That's all God has asked of me. God has not asked me to correct the Pope, to fix the Vatican Curia, to, you know what I mean? That's not my pay grade. That's not what he's asked of me. Now I'm a broadcaster, so I have to have sincerity and integrity with what I do with this microphone. If I just use the microphone to talk about fun things that are feel-good things that avoid all controversies and never touch that third rail, I don't think I can sleep at night, because, bad things are happening, and if I'm not calling them out, shame on me. So
the easiest thing in the world would be to do? The easiest thing in the world would be to start a podcast where I go there and I just take these stupid TikTok food hack videos and talk about them in a podcast form, because I get recommended that stuff. And I don't know why. Yeah. Like, there's one that Facebook keeps recommending. This guy sitting there very seriously says, you go to the drive-thru at McDonald's and you ask for a double cheeseburger, but order it like a Mac. And I can sit there going, you did show prep for this. How are you not laughing at yourself?
You did show prep. You actually put effort into this. Casey, female Casey Royals fan. I will not accept, nor will I run, nor will I will run. I will run in the opposite direction if I were to be named president. Sorry. Don't write me in. Don't vote for me. I do not want the job. Thank you, but no thank you.
Hey, Nikki Haley is gaining on Trump right now in New Hampshire.
Yikes.
He's still up 30 points or something on her. Nikki Haley is the Republican that would get me to stay home, actually. Of all the Republicans on stage, her or Chris Christie would, because I don't want George W. Bush again. I don't want another neocon warmonger. I don't
like Nikki Haley.
She's weirdly the one who pulls the best
against Trump fan either, though. I'm pretty
not either.
Of Donald Trump.
I'm not either. I liked him on foreign policy.
Right.
His abortion takes are painful these days.
Yeah, these days, sure. Hey, his judges were obviously good choices that led to good things. Were they perfect? No, but they led to good things. Praise be to God. Many lives were saved.
I'm never going to unironically call him the God Emperor, though, like a lot of his fans do. I only ever call him that to
I don't think he's even used that since 2017.
Donald Trump gave $1 billion of American tax dollars to the pharmaceutical companies.
Mm-hmm.
Let that sink in. It was like watching, for me, it was like a blast to the past to the 1980s era of wrestling. And you got the Von Erichs there with Andre the Giant, and the Von Erich brothers are tag teaming each other in, to try to take on the big guy or Hulk Hogan or somebody like that, or Roddy Rod Piper. You got Donald Trump and Joe Biden tag teaming like the good old Von Erichs. Remember that? The barefoot wrestlers from the 80s, because Donald Trump gives them $1 billion, gives them light speed, warp speed, whatever speed you like to cram that shot down your throat. And it was used to do a lot of damage on planet Earth. And Joe Biden was the guy who rammed it home. Tag team. Let that sink in. Not to mention, he does not support marriage between a man and a woman. He is open to destroying the very fabric and foundation of society. He will not stand up for traditional marriage. Let that sink in. And so he's not I'm not a huge Trump guy. And
I'm not a huge Trump guy either.
Is he better than Joe Biden? Well, that's not even an argument. That's not a serious conversation. Of course, anybody
right.
is.
The only person who there on the stage who might not be better than Joe Biden is Nikki Haley, just because she has talked about wanting to dox everybody on the internet and talked about wanting to bomb everybody in the Middle East. I'm like, well,
embrace Disney. She's a big Disney fan. I mean, good grief.
Right. Biden's credit, and I can't believe I'm saying this, he hasn't, started dropping bombs on Russia or Iran yet. Notice caveat yet, though. I mean,
a lot. How do you feel about How do you feel about Vivek Ramaswamy?
I have a real hard time with pagan vegetarians and the idea of them becoming president of the United States. Just bluntly, I'm not a bigot on this issue. That's sad too, because if Trump became president and made him his press secretary, which would be hysterical. That guy's press secretary would be great, right? Because he's the kind of guy who will hit you back harder than you hit him. Or a cabinet position that his competency was fine. I'd be fine with that. But
I
agree. There's a limit. There's a limit to my tolerance. I go back to Fulton Sheen. He says that there's not that he begged people to be more intolerant, not more tolerant. He says that we have a crisis of tolerance in the West right now. And now I'm not going to come after Vivek Ramaswamy because of his ethnicity, but I don't know if I want a pagan vegetarian running the United States.
Yeah, exactly.
Unpopular take, I know.
And how does his Hinduism affect? That's the lens through it. I make no secret. I'm a Catholic. I look at the entire world through the lens of my Catholic faith. No exceptions to the rule, because I believe it to be true. Yeah. I believe it to be the only solution for mankind. And so that's why I don't do anything unless it looks through that lens. So I would argue Vivek's probably doing the same thing, just from a Hindu pagan standpoint. So how does that lens?
I'd be disappointed on an integrity level with him if he didn't.
Right.
Honestly.
And so how does that affect all kinds of things that I would find is troubling and problematic? So from that perspective alone, I mean, I don't want to be like Nancy Pelosi. You have to pass it to find out the hard way. Right. And I have issues with, he's already said he does not support a federal ban on abortion. I don't know. Maybe has anybody gotten any explanation where he's coming from that? Is it because he just thinks, Joe, I'm totally against abortion, but I just don't want the federal government involved at all, one way or the other? Is it that sort of, that political view, or does he not support a federal ban on abortion because he really wants to play that middle ground? Kind of like that Conway lady who is supposedly a Catholic and an advisor to Donald Trump, who is telling all the Republicans to push contraception right now. I'm sorry. You're fired. No, thank you. You're supposed to be a Catholic. You should know better than that. It's evil. So we don't support evil under any circumstances, even if your Republican rhinos don't agree.
The sad thing is we're not talking about the one actual Catholic candidate there. Ron DeSantis,
Ron DeSantis,
I liked him early on until it became pretty clear that he was hiring all the worst people to be around him.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat there too.
People you go, knock him for the boots thing. And people go, why is that important? I'm like, because it means there's an insecurity there. And that's actually a giant red flag for anybody if you have signs of insecurity.
He was more powerful position you have a year ago. He was stronger a year ago. This last year's not been favorable to him.
And this thing is, I love what he's done to Disney. Absolutely love what he's done to Disney.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And for marriage.
More of that.
Yeah.
And for marriage and for, I think he toots his own horn a little too loudly on the COVID stuff since he did shut Florida down. He's not what Christy Noam or whatever who didn't, but it's weird how he collapsed. Absolutely collapsed. But again, who knows?
The governor of California, I mean, it was almost comical to watch Newsom riding Ron DeSantis. All right, Ron, you're 30 points behind Trump, Ron. Like, that was such a burn then. It was almost embarrassing to watch.
Meanwhile, DeSantis punches him in the face, basically back with the whole,
but your dad,
you are okay with mutilating children. So,
and your father-in-law left California because of your policies. Like,
so I have one scenario where I could vote for Nikki Haley, and if in November we're faced with President Haley versus President Newsom, I'd be like, well, Gavin Newsom is possibly the worst possible person to become president of the United States right now, short of Nancy Pelosi or somebody.
Yeah, he's the Cardinal Fernandez of the political world. Yeah, you don't want that guy. You don't want that guy for sure. No, thank you. I mean, so and under those circumstances, though, you got two options. You write somebody in that you think is the proper choice, regardless of
not my state, or irregardless.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Well, I mean, there
my
you go.
It's only who's on the ballot, and there's only very few third party candidates. Like, I can't in good conscience vote for the Constitution Party because those guys are the kind of evangelical wingnuts who think that Catholics worship the Pope, who is the Antichrist.
Yeah,
I can't vote for that.
So either you write somebody in if you can or not, if you can write them in, or you vote for the path of least resist, or the lesser of two evils, rather, is what I wanted to say. So you can go lesser of two evils, because that's the only options you have, or you stay home, which is really writing a third-party candidate in a state where you can't do that. And I've gotten a lot of pushback over the years for having that opinion. Joe, you got to vote for the team because we've got to win at all costs. I'm sorry, you put up garbage for me to vote for. I'm not voting. I'm not putting my name on garbage just because you want me to. Okay,
right. So this is why I think this is the primary is your better bet in phase one.
Yep.
Because once it gets to the big time, if say Trump wins the primary, but they put him in jail and the GOP does what I suspect they might try to do, which is to say, you cannot be the president. You cannot be our nominee for the Republican Party because you're in jail, even though there's no law saying he can't. And there is plenty of precedent for Americans running for president from prison and getting millions upon millions of votes. Hello, Eugene Debs. I can't believe I'd ever positively cite you. But for those who don't know him, that guy was the Socialist Party candidate for president in the heyday of socialism in America in the first part of the 20th century. Ran for president multiple times, including once from prison, and got millions of votes. Give you an idea where America was 100 years ago.
And if they put him in jail, they're only going to fan his flame. If Trump goes to jail, they're going to fan his flame. That's all. I mean, Vivek is saying he doesn't want to be on the primary ballot for Colorado if they don't put Trump back on. So, I mean, good on him for doing that. I mean, that shows integrity on Vivek's, point on his side. Praise be to God. But it's just,
I do hope the Supreme Court comes down on this, but I can't figure out how they can do it constitutionally.
It is
because the states regulate their own.
We're given only bad choices. We're given only bad choices. There are no great choices. When Dr. Taylor Marshall said he was going to run for president, I reached out to him. He hasn't really. It's been a couple years since he withdrew that. Been able to talk. I know he withdrew that. I reached out to him when he first announced, and then I reached back to him because he said to me, okay, well, I'm going to go on retreat in France, maybe when I get back. So when he got back, I followed up, and he withdrew, and I said I'd still want to come. I wanted to come up and sit down with him. I offered to get a hotel room, provide all the production gear and all that. And I was going to do a Tucker Carlson type of interview with him face to face because I wanted to further explore. And even after he withdrew, I'm like, the conversation is intriguing enough. What would it look like to have a truly authentic, zealously Orthodox Catholic be president of the United States? And I wanted to have that conversation, but he would not reciprocate. So it was unfortunate. But I feel like that would be a fascinating philosophical conversation that one should still have. And because he put out a policy list, I thought that'd be a great platform to have that conversation. But unfortunately, he wouldn't reciprocate to it. I feel there can be zero compromise. And because there can be zero compromise, there is also zero chance than any true Catholic Orthodox candidate could ever actually be president of the United States. I don't know.
And if one ever did happen, he'd get shot.
Yeah, and then they would just shoot him. Anyway, hey, God bless you all. Hey, thanks again for jumping back on with us. That was a fun after show today. Appreciate it, Dr. Stine.
Make sure to send me the link so I can send that to my patrons later.
I will. God bless you all. See you back here tomorrow.